Dude, did you order...
The new iPhone 17 Pro? Got it from Verizon, the best 5G network in America. I've never looked so good.
You look the same.
But with this camera, everything looks better. Especially me.
You haven't changed your hair in 15 years. Selfies? Check, please.
With Verizon, new and existing customers can get the new iPhone 17 Pro, designed to be the most powerful iPhone ever, plus a new iPad and Apple One. With eligible phone trade-in and unlimited ultimate. Best 5G scores, root metrics data, United States, 1H 2025. All rights reserved. Trade-in and additional terms apply for all offers. See Verizon.com for details.
Stop! Before you drag yourself to that coffee pot tomorrow morning, try this instead. Tonight, fill a shaker with water. Add 1 scoop of Early Bird and put it on your nightstand. When your alarm screams at 5 a.m., drink it first. What happens next will shock you. Your brain doesn't gradually wake up, it switches on. The fog vanishes, you're not surviving your morning, you're conquering it. This blood orange mimosa ritual turned more than 1,000 night owls into morning warriors this week alone. Get yours at clubearlybird.com and use code NEVERSNOOZE for 20% off.
Hello and welcome to 31 Days of Terror 2025, and we are on day number 20. And I have one spooky story for you today, and our story today comes from Bin. This isn't a scary story. There is no Hat Man, there are no goblins or fairies, not even a shadow figure. Just a little woman who scared the crap out of everyone. My grandmother stood a formidable 5'4". Her father, an even more formidable 5'2", was a Baptist minister with 10 children. To say they stretched a penny is putting it mildly. Having parents with parishioners to feed before you and your 9 siblings got a morsel made you tough pretty quick. Some of her first years were during the Depression, spent in a coal mining town in the Blue Mountains of Australia in a strict Baptist family. No room for childish nonsense there. She married the love of her life in 1948 at the age of 21. She gave birth to my father in 1950, my aunt in 1952, and together they bought a brand new 3-bed red brick house in a lovely Sydney suburb in 1956. Idyllic. Every woman's dream. In 1963, at the age of 37, her husband passed away with his head cradled in her lap, after suffering multiple heart attacks over several hours. They had owned a chiming clock that went off every 15 minutes. At one point, she left the room to turn it off as she thought it might be bothering him. He asked if she wouldn't mind starting it again, so he knew how long he had with her. They had only been married 15 years. He was buried on her 37th birthday. He sounded like such a lovely man, and I'm so sad I never got to know him. When I was growing up, I couldn't work out how my grandmother had married such an awful man. She was awful. She would say hurtful, offensive things and seem quite indifferent to the chaos it might cause. I hated going to her house as a child. Not only because it reeked of cigarettes, she smoked inside with everything closed, so much so the walls and ceiling turned orange from the nicotine. Because I couldn't work out what was going to get me into trouble. There seemed to be a code that I couldn't crack. She gave my brother and I a game set to use one day, which was of course 50 years old, and we were mucking around playing cards. She came and watched for a moment and then shrieked at us for cheating. You should never cheat. Cool it, lady, we're 8 and 10. I introduced one of my friends to her one day. I'm so sorry for what she's about to say. I don't know what it is, but I'm sorry. My grandmother slowly looked her up and down. Well, that haircut doesn't suit you at all, does it? Damn it, she's done it again. She was in hospital once, and while looking at a stunned black male nurse said to me, I didn't know black people could be nurses. I was horrified, to say the least. He heard and just laughed, thank God. As a teenager, I could not stand her. But as I got older, I tried to appreciate her more. Firstly, she'd had a fucking hard life, and she chose to do it alone, raising 2 kids on her own, choosing to stay in the house where her husband died, finding jobs where she found satisfaction, and seeing her children marry and start families of their own. I realised she wasn't mean or awful, she was just honest. It was often brutal honesty, but it was honesty. She once said to me, "You're not getting any thinner." Fine, just being honest, and it was true. During her final 10 years, I would visit every 6 weeks or so, and she would have a list of jobs for me to do. But first, lunch. And she would get out her platter and chutney bowls from the 60s and put on a spread. Cheese, Swiss just for me, crackers, boiled eggs, pickles, chocolate, everything. Actually, she once offered me a dark chocolate bowl. I said no thanks, I didn't really like dark chocolate. Bah, no wonder you've never married. Pretty classic grandma right there. But honest. After lunch was a cuppa and a cigarette, and the whole time she just told stories about everything. She knew about everything. She had the most incredible mind. She could tell you every step of her honeymoon in America in 1948, even her room number. I found myself looking forward to our time together as I watched her cheeky wit come through. I think all the great-grandkids mellowed her out. Even in her 90s, her mind was totally compos mentis. The only problem was her body. It was falling apart from the inside out. She had once remarked, "These doctors are keeping me alive out of spite." When she was 87, I got a message from my dad asking me to check on Grandma, as she had texted to say that she had tripped on the footpath. I walked in to find her sitting in her armchair, with blood all over her face and an obviously deformed wrist. "Before you is an old woman," she remarked. "Oh, you poor sausage, what have you done?" Me trying not to panic and escalate things. I was walking up to the red post box to send a letter to the sheriff saying I couldn't do jury duty. I tripped on the curb crossing the road. This ought to do it. "Okay," I said. "I'll call the ambos and pack a bag." "No ambulance. They won't take me where I want to go. We'll have a cuppa and a cig and then you can drive me." I just tossed up my hands. "Righto." She did require surgery, but refused it as she didn't want the anaesthetic and to wake up with dementia. I guess she won that battle with the doctors too. The last time I saw her was 1 week before she died. She shrieked at me about my tattoos, tiny morsels of food flying from her dentures. "It's self-mutilation. Why do you hate yourself?" It was a regular dance we did. I pulled her no longer formidable tiny 4'9" frame into my embrace. With a little chuckle, I said, "I love you, and I'll see you soon." I can't believe I was lucky enough to have those as my last words. On October the 1st, 2022, the bell rang for the family to say that Grandma had passed overnight in her home, as her husband had passed 59 years ago, as she had wanted, as we had all wanted. After the funeral and the formalities and a little time had passed, we had a job to do. The house. Even though it was old and musty and filled with old junk and valuable antiques, we were yet to figure out which was which, and someone had died in the house. I never found it to be creepy. Nothing was modern. Everything was still original from 1956, from the pink tiled bathroom to the old beast of a gas oven. She had never done a remodel on anything. She even still had her original furniture. Beds, wardrobes, dining tables, sofa. One strange thing that had happened to me when I was 14. My parents had separated, so my dad moved back into his old bedroom at my grandma's for a year. He filled the room with his bed and a TV complete with surround sound system, as you do. I was sitting on the bed and I had my brand new CD playing, Boys to Men, and Loving Life. I remember the song playing was Yesterday, the a cappella version of the Beatles classic, when all of a sudden the volume started going up. I don't mean I think it's getting a wee bit louder, but holy shit, why the fuck is this getting so loud? Grandma's going to crack it and chuck an antique at me. I stood up to check if I was sitting on the remote, but as I did I could see it was on the bed next to me about a foot away. I looked at the amp and could see the large volume dial turning on its own. What the... I reached out and grabbed it and turned the volume back down low. I let go slowly to make sure it was done with its shenanigans, and it appeared to be so. I shrugged my shoulders and left the room, strangely uncreeped out by the whole event. I was later informed my grandfather was a bit of a jokester, so perhaps it was him and he just liked the song. Over the years, she had filled this house with collectibles. The trick was going to be sorting out what was worth something and what was junk. Either way, I loved it. So many treasures to sort through. As I don't have kids and grandkids to wrangle, I ended up spending almost every weekend there for about 6 months, with my aunt and my cousin coming when they could. We had such a wonderful bonding experience. We laughed and we cried. We spent a lot of time saying, "What the fuck is this?" and replying with, "Google Lens it." One afternoon I was there by myself, getting ready to head off. It had been a long, productive day and I was tired. The routine was lock the back door, work your way through the dining room and living room, pulling down all the roller blinds and locking the glass doors, then the front door on your way out. My drive was about 40 minutes, so I thought I'll just duck to the loo before I go. Business done, I stepped out of the bathroom, into the kitchen, turned right and took a couple of steps and onto the carpet in the dining room. There was a huge bang and a thwack. "Shit, fuck," I said with a delicate pirouette. What in the shit sticks was that? The moment I had stepped onto the carpet, one of the blinds in front of me flew up at 1,000,000 miles an hour, bottom to top in 1 second flat. Got my heart going like a racehorse. Luckily, I had just been to the toilet, so all good in that department. I decided to have a little conversation. "Grandma, you know we have to keep these down for security. No one is here to scare people off like you used to, so please leave it alone." And I swear I could hear her giggling. Gotcha. I found out sometime later that the exact spot where I stepped from the kitchen into the dining room carpet was the exact place that she died. That made it infinitely creepier. As we were getting into the nitty-gritty cleaning side, the three of us were in separate parts of the house scrubbing away. I was in the laundry, someone in the bathroom and someone in the bedroom. Bang! Shit, fuck, pirouette again. What in the bloody hell was that crash? My aunt and I both walked into the kitchen at the same time, looking curiously at each other. What was that? We both looked at the floor and noticed that the oven door had opened on its own and come crashing down and smashed into the floor, loudly. Again, not creepy, just really weird. And again, hearing Grandma having quite the giggle in the distance. Gotcha. Her final gotcha was a little more savage. One of the jobs that I took upon myself was to pull the piano apart. It was a shitty old upright that was worth more as firewood than as a piano. I started with it inside the house, removing the top timber face, keys and lower timber face. It was going to get a bit messier from here, as I was probably going to use the reciprocal saw, and I figured that I had made it a tiny bit lighter, so I decided to wheel it out the front door onto the concrete porch. This was surprisingly easy, considering it's approximately 200 kilograms and I am a 5 foot, 65 kilogram chick. I propped it against the wall, tipping back on the slightest angle. I didn't want it to topple onto me. I continued pulling and cutting bits off, working around the cast iron internal frame. There were 3 large flathead screws I finally had access to at the base of the piano, about where the pedals would be. I decided that would be my next step. I grabbed the large flathead and went to work. Being they were old brass and shitty flats, I had to put considerable pressure on them. It was at that moment that my heart dropped. Shit. I hadn't taken the casters off the bottom, and this thing was on the move. As I pushed in the bottom, the 200 kilogram top started coming over on top of me. As I started scurrying out as fast as I could, all I could think was, it's going to break my fucking femur. I was incredibly lucky. The top edge of the piano struck me high on my arm, slid down and stopped on the bottom of my forearm, resulting in a massive hematoma, about the size of a tennis ball. This has developed into a lipoma, which I still wear with pride 2.5 years later. Now, what I can't figure out is if Grandma gave the piano a little nudge, because it pretty much landed on a 4-week-old tattoo. She really did hate them. Or did she help me get out in time, knowing I was by myself and would be in serious trouble if it landed on top of me? I'd like to think it's the latter. When I grow up, I would like to be a formidable old woman who lives alone, smokes cigarettes all the time, and just is really brutally honest with people. And I smoked for many, many, many years, and I do not smoke anymore. I haven't smoked in probably around 5 years. But let me tell you, I miss it. So that's what we're aiming for. Getting to be an old woman and being, you know, kind of vaguely aggressive, but very honest, with loads of good stories. And I'm going to take up smoking again. And I'm going to smoke roll-ups again. And it's going to be wonderful. It does sound like your grandmother was an incredible woman and absolutely, completely and utterly formidable, which I love. Like that's you know, sometimes you have to be. And I can only imagine she'd gotten to a point in her life where she had lost her husband. He had died in her arms, you know, and she had gone, you know what? Fuck this. What am I wasting my time being super nice for? There's no need. She raised her kids. She had her grandkids, her great grandkids, you know. I can see how when you're younger, you're like, oh, she is terrifying and also quite mean. But then as you get older, you go, okay, it just is what it is. I see you. And I think that a woman like that probably would defend her household furiously, because she'd be like, listen, I collected all these things. This is my home. I lived here. I had tragedy here. I had joy here. And you don't get to pull down the blinds. No, I want the blinds open. Or I would also like to think she didn't try and kill you with a piano. I know that's not what you were trying to say, but I like the drama of it. I would like to think that she somehow looked after you, saved you, and the tattoo being injured was probably, I would imagine, probably just a happy coincidence on her behalf, you know, that she was like, I did warn you about getting tattoos. And I'd like to think that your grandfather and grandmother in some way were looking out for you and were making themselves known and were kind of either jokingly or otherwise making their presence known, and that is quite a beautiful thing. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Thank you to Bin for sending in your stories. Remember, if you would like to send in your story, you can do so by emailing it to reallifeghoststoriespodcast@gmail.com. You can also check out the website, reallifeghoststoriespodcast.com. And if you are desperate for some extra content, you can subscribe to the Patreon. That is patreon.com/reallifeghoststories, where for $5 a month or for $2 a month, you can get access to heaps of extra content, as well as every single main and mini episode completely ad-free. And on that note, I shall see you next time.
You know what's faster than your paycheck? Literally everything. It's time to get your pay up to speed. With Earnin, you can access your pay as you work instead of waiting days and weeks for a paycheck. Get up to $150 a day with a max of $750 between paydays. No interest, no credit checks, and no mandatory fees. Because, hey, it's your money. Download the Earnin app now to get it and join millions of people making any day payday. That's EARNIN. Earnin is not a bank. Access limits are based on your earnings and risk factors. Available in select states. Expedited transfers available for a fee. Terms and restrictions apply. Visit earnin.com for full details.